It's time for America's birthday. It is 1976, and we're going to take a look at the books that have the most copies on the CGC census for 1976. Up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe. Check out the description of this video for all that good stuff. Links to my eBay store, my email, my whatnot, and my Instagram. So, we are going to go through the CGC top books for 1976. And what we do every week on this list, we do another year. And we go count down the top 10 books with the most copies in Blue Label in the CGC census. And then we also make sure we include other keys, the top 10 books from both Marvel and DC, as well as the top book from every other major publisher. Although, I will say this, I keep it to pretty much American publishers. There's there's a couple of exceptions here and there, but I don't really do census counts for like foreign variants of books. But every once in a while we get a book that is not American. So let's start at number 10, and at number 10 is Eternals number 3 by Jack Kirby. And this was a series that Kirby did when he came back to Marvel. Issue number 3 features the first appearance of Cersei, who later on would join the Avengers and was played by Gemma Chan in the 2021 Eternals film. I think one of the more popular characters in the Eternals book, it was like issue by issue, Kirby would introduce new characters. So there are a lot of first appearances in these early issues. At number 9, number 10 has a census count of 2,627. Now we go by census counts. It's interesting. I take this from CGCdata.com, and since CGC is transfer their information from the census count to the population report, there have been no updates, and they used to do weekly updates on CGCdata.com since July 1st. But I said this last week, I don't think that really makes much of a difference in terms of how it affects the counts of these books at this point in time. So let's continue and go to number 9 on the list, and we're not going too far afield. Number 9 on the list is Eternals number 2. This, again, Jack Kirby. And this is the first appearance of Ajak, who was portrayed by Salma Hayek in the film. Also the first appearance of the Celestials. So they bring all that concept in early on. We'll get to more Eternals in just a minute. Census count 2,863. Number 8 on the list is All-Star Comics number 58, and this is from DC. This is the first appearance of Power Girl. This is Jerry Conway did the story, Rick Estrada and Wally Wood did the art, and Mike Grell did the cover. So this is the first new issue. All-Star Comics ran for 57 issues in the Golden Age, and then came back here for, I guess it was an 18-issue run. And this was the first appearance of Power Girl, who is essentially the Earth 2 equivalent of Supergirl. And was a breakout hit at the time. She was one of the more popular characters in the All-Star run. And as a matter of fact, when they had the JLA, JSA crossovers every year, Power Girl was always included. And she remains a popular character to this day for several reasons. And it was a character that they kind of had to keep in continuity because of her popularity after the Crisis on Infinite Earths got rid of Earth 2. So they kind of had to reconfigure her origin. They have brought it back in recent years, but it does get convoluted because it is connected to the original Earth 2 Superman. And this particular book has a census count of 2,917. Number 7 on our list is Marvel Spotlight number 28. This is the first solo Moon Knight story. He had made his debut in Werewolf by Night 32 the year prior, and here's where he got a 2-issue tryout and then eventually got his own series. Doug mentioned the story. Don Perlin did the art as well as the cover. This is one of those books that, and we're going to see, I think, more of them as we go on in time, where they were driven by speculation, and during the comic boom specifically, and also the idea of what the comic boom led to was the importance not just of the first appearance, but of the second appearance, and the first solo story, and the first ongoing series, and the first cover appearance. So for characters like Moon Knight, right, you have his first appearance, his first solo story here, and, then he gets Moon Knight number 1, and all of those people were clamoring for those books during the comic boom with the show coming out. And it turns out there are quite a few of these. This particular book, a census count of 3,614. Number 6 on the list is X-Men number 100, this classic cover of the old X-Men versus the new X-Men. Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum doing the work on this book. It's an anniversary issue, but I think just, I'm not sure when this composition first appeared of two battling groups, usually of heroes, not necessarily heroes and villains, but of heroes opposing each other. But yeah, it's classic. You got the old X-Men and the new X-Men, and again, a classic cover. There are a total of 4,417 blue label copies on the census. At number 5 on the list is Daredevil number 131, the first appearance of Bullseye. Daredevil's one of his main antagonists. And of course, he was portrayed by Colin Farrell in the film, and then he's also appeared to great effect in the television series. Marv Wolfman did the story. Bob Brown and Klaus Janson did the art. This is pre-Frank Miller. Rich Buckler and Frank Giacoia did the cover. And this is a Marvel value stamp book, but there are only 74 qualified copies on the census. I think what happens is with this book, as opposed to Hulk 181, which has a lot more value, people are less likely to submit this if they know it's going to get a qualified grade. And it is a smaller value stamp at this point in time. It's like, I guess, less obvious and maybe less kids cut it out. I'm not sure. One thing that of note here, you see here, and this has been true of a few books on the list, all the Marvel books so far, you have a barcode. It's a newsstand. They're all newsstands until 1979. So this is the year we first started seeing the barcodes. I guess that's around when the barcode scanner became common in, supermarkets and such. At any rate, the census count here, 4,628. Number 5 on the list. I'm surprised number 4 on the list. I'm surprised it's this low because it is a major, major key. X-Men number 101, the first appearance of Phoenix. This is a book that has a great following. It's been adapted in 2 movies and an animated show. The whole Phoenix story arc. Claremont and Cockrum. And again, a classic cover, a classic storyline, first appearance. Of all the books in the top 10, this has by far the lowest average grade of the books at 7.7. Most of the others are well into the 8s and maybe even 9. And this comes in with a total census count of 7,682. At number 3 on the list is Spectacular Spider-Man number 1. This is the second ongoing Spider-Man solo comic book. He had Marvel Team Up. He had a magazine. Jerry Conway did the story. Sal Buscema did the interior art with Mike Esposito, and he did the cover with John Romita. Tarantula appearance every time. It's always the same pose for Tarantula whenever he appears. It seems in the 70s. But this led to this series ran for 263 issues. Very long running series. And the other thing about this is there are 858 9/8 on the census, which is a lot more than the other books in the on the census for 1976. I believe that's because number ones were heavily promoted at this time, as opposed to, a 101 or a 58. So there seemed to be more. Then Spider-Man was immensely popular, so you're going to put out a lot more number ones for a new Spider-Man title than a title with an unproven character or characters. Number 3 on the list, just 4 ahead of the Phoenix at 7,686. So, if new data came in, those could flip-flop very easily. Coming in at number 2 on the list is Nova number 1. This is the first appearance of Nova, Richard Rider. Marv Wolfman did the story. John Buscema did the art with Joe Sinnott, and Rich Buckler and Joe Sinnott did the cover. Again, another book that was heavily, heavily speculated on. We're going to get a Nova TV series. There's going to be a Nova movie. It's coming to the MCU. Not yet. Kind of a cross, I think, between Spider-Man and Green Lantern. Gets his power from an alien source, but he's a teenager. The Nova series ran for 25 issues. There have been other characters that have inherited the Nova mantle over time. And again, I think this was one of those books that was pushed by the comic boom due to speculation. It's a number 1, so there are probably a lot of copies out there. And the total number of copies on the census that is 8,738. Let's go to number 1 on the list. I was surprised by this. Eternals number 1 by Jack Kirby, with John Verpoorten doing the interior inks and Frank Giacoia doing the inks on the cover. Origin, first appearance of the Eternals, first appearance of Icarus. Kirby came back to Marvel after the Fourth World and then Commandy Demon, OMAC at DC, and got the Eternals. It's kind of continuation of the New God story. And this book ran for 19 issues. Now, there are a lot of copies out there, but this is a book that this census count, and it's number 1 by nearly 1,300 copies. There are a lot of books on the census, but I want to do a little comparison, because this, again, is a book that was driven by speculation, by the movies. I believe if there was never an Eternals movie, this would not be number 1. So let's take a look at a couple of graphs, some data here. So here we have a graph of from 2015 to 2024, the number of copies that were on the census. So 121 copies added to the census in 2015, then 213, 135. Okay. Then in April of 2018, the movie's announced. 960 copies were added to the census in 2018. The following year, 2,438 copies added. That just 4 years earlier was 121. Then in 2020, now we're starting to enter the comic boom. The movie isn't out yet. It's in production. It has an Oscar-winning director attached to it. 1,736 copies added to the census. The movie comes out in 2021. 1,645 copies in the census. Now, we all know that after the movie came out, this book kind of, the air was taken out of it, but it was still the comic boom. And remember, CGC was really backed up in terms of getting books graded at this time. So the books that were added to the census in 2022, probably about half of them were submitted in 2021. 2022, another 1,692 copies added to the census. Movie comes out, and in 2023, 327 copies to the census, and last year, 255. Now, that big jump, comic boom, everybody was submitting everything. But let's compare it to another book on the top 10 that is a long-established key, has been a key for decades, is going to be a key going forward, and that's X-Men 101, right? In 2015, 216 copies added to the census, about twice of the Eternals. Then 277, 374, 549. We get to 2019, 759. 2020, only 474. Then Comic Boom, 709. Then the most of any year, 1,063 added in 2022. I think that has to do with people submitting everything. Then 767 and 815. So still a lot of copies. So it never even got to half the number of copies that Eternals had in a particular year, right? Eternals in 2019 had 2,400 copies. This book maxed out at just over 1,000 copies. So that boom, like, exponentially increased the number of copies of Eternals #1 that got submitted. But this book has remained steady, right? 815 copies submitted last year compared to the Eternals, 255. So I think this will be a kind of a theme that we're going to see as we go through these lists and look at books on the top 10 as books that were really driven by movie hype and speculation. And books that had a lot of copies graded during the comic boom. Anyway, Eternals #1, total Blue Label copies on the census of 10,028. Let's take a look at some other books. There was one DC book on the top 10, so we need one more Marvel book to have the Marvel top 10. And that 10th Marvel book is X-Men '99, Claremont and Cockrum. First appearance of Black Tom Cassidy. But I think all these early X-Men issues, there are people who try to collect, high-grade copies of 94 through 143, the Cockrum and the Byrne stuff. There are certainly folks that collect all the X-Men or collect all the Claremont X-Men. And these double digits, 94 to 99, are going to be very sought after. So this was, this was a popular book. And this has a total number of 2,307 copies on the census. Let's talk about a couple of other keys. Marvel Premiere #28, it's the first appearance of the Legion of Monsters. This was another book that was driven hard by speculation. Man-Thing, Werewolf by Night, Morbius, and Ghost Rider. Bill Mantlo did the story. Frank Robbins and Steve Gann did the art. And Nick Cardy did the cover. An unusual Nick Cardy Marvel cover. Huh. He was more or less done with DC after 1975. Yeah. After Witching Hour 60. Huh. Cardy left comic books about this time in the mid-70s. And did commercial art. Movie advertising art for films, including Apocalypse Now. That'd be interesting to find some Nick Cardy Apocalypse Now stuff. Also did California Suite and Street Fighter. At any rate, Legion of Monsters, Nick Cardy cover from Marvel, which is kind of unique. Total number of copies on the census of 2,071. Another Marvel key, Howard the Duck #1. Steve Gerber and Frank Brunner. He gets his own solo series here. It lasted for 33 issues. And this was a big key for a long time. And then, talk about movie hype and its aftermath. You thought The Eternals was poorly received? Are you old enough to remember when Howard the Duck came out in 1986? Produced by George Lucas with Leah Thompson. That was like an all-time stinker. And I think it kept Marvel away from the movies for nearly 2 decades. Or at least for like another, dozen years. It was horrendous. Anyway, your opinion may differ. Howard the Duck #1, 1,948. From a Marvel magazine, Marvel Preview #4. This is the first appearance of Star-Lord. And Marvel Preview, again, was one of those magazines also under the Curtis imprint. Gray Morrow did the cover here. Steve Englehart did the interior stories. Yeah. So this, again, this book got really jolted its popularity with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and it has a total of 1,624 copies on the census. The next book, this was an interesting one. Captain Britain #1. This is from Marvel UK. It's a magazine size, and it includes, you can see down in the bottom right there, a Captain Britain mask. In order to not get a green qualified label, that mask has to be included in the submission. Origin first appearance of Captain Britain. Later came over to regular Marvel Comics over here in the U.S. Chris Claremont, though, did the story, and Larry Lieber, Stan's brother, Stan Lee's brother, did the cover. But a popular book, and there are a lot of them out there. They're actually, the mean grade of this is 9.13, and there are 251 9/8. Total census count is 952. The next book on our list is another issue of Marvel Preview. This is Marvel Preview number 7, another book that was jolted in popularity by the Guardians of the Galaxy films. This has Satana as the cover character, but it's the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon. Chris Claremont did the story. Keith Giffen and Vicente Alcazar did the cover. Satana, kind of Marvel Curtis's answer to Vampirella. But Rocket became, a huge runaway star in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and here's his first appearance in a magazine. We'll see both him and Star-Lord have their first appearance, and we'll note those as we get to those years. But this particular book has a census count of 892. Next book on the list is Action Comics number 1. This is a Safeguard promo reprint. It is a paper cover. It only reprints the Superman story. There's no Zatara or Tex Thompson or anything in there. Newsprint cover, I should say. They're all paper, right? At this point in time. And there are a few reprints that they did of this book around the time. This one, what notes it is the back, it's Safeguard deodorant soap. And you cut out the coupon and save 10 cents. Action Comics, we never know, first appearance of Superman, yada, yada, yada. 590 on the census. The next book is Super Friends number 1. And this is an adaptation of the popular Saturday morning cartoon. But how popular? Let's talk about that in a second. E. Nelson Bridwell did the story. Rick Estrada and Joe Orlando did the art. Ernie Chan, who was DC's cover artist of choice at the time, did the cover with Vinnie Coletta. Now, this is kind of interesting. Super Friends debuted in 1973, and it ran in the 73-74 year, TV season. It had, Superman, Batman, and Robin, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman as the Super Friends, and it was pretty much those 5. I think there was a Green Arrow episode, guest starred once in Flash, once in Plastic Man. But this first season was that it. It was just one season. It ran. They did have Marvin and Wendy and Wonder Dog. Marvin and Wendy were the junior superheroes who were in training. Later retconned into DC continuity as the Children of the Calculator. But this comic book ran for 47 issues. But what's really interesting is this came out in November 1976. So right at the beginning of the 76 TV season. But there were no new Super Friends. I think it might have still been running in reruns because I remember seeing Super Friends for a long time. But we didn't get new Super Friends episodes after that first season until a year later with the all-new Super Friends Hour, which premiered in September 1977. And the other thing about this is a DC TV comic. They kind of... there are a few more books we're going to talk about because they had other properties that were either TV adaptations or adaptations of TV shows or TV shows that adapted comic books. Super Friends number 1, census count 543. Speaking of TV series, this is ISIS number 1. Denny O'Neil did the story, Rick Estrada and Wally Wood and the art, and Kurt Scheffenberger did the cover. This was based on a live-action Saturday morning TV series on CBS that ran in the 75-76 year. And again, this is interesting, right? It ran the year before, and then this comes out, I think it was still running with Shazam, but they had 2 seasons. That's right. The first season, they dumped all the episodes in the fall of 75, and the second season, all the episodes in the fall of 76. 22 episodes in total, and it was paired with Shazam. And there were some crossover episodes. It was a Shazam ISIS Adventure Hour or Power Hour. This comic book ran for 8 issues. And it was set in its kind of own universe, but it was kind of connected to Shazam because of the TV connection. They did later on bring in Isis as a character in regular DC continuity. She married Black Adam. That was like kind of the character that they were alluding to in the movie. And then Rock did what he did and ruined all that. And he did reestablish the balance of power in the DC universe into the hands of James Gunn. So Isis #1, Census count of 441. Next book is an interesting one because we've already talked about Eternals #1, but this is the 30-cent price variant, which is much more expensive. So Marvel did 2 waves of this. They did a 30-cent price variant where in certain markets they I guess they tested it out to see how much they would lose, how many readers they would lose by upping the price of the book, right? Because think about it. At 25 cents, if you get $1 for allowance back in 1976, you can get 4 comic books. 30 cents, you can only get 3 comic books and you get a dime left over. So, a kid might have to make some decisions as to what they're going to, what books they might not buy anymore. At any rate, the ones that are connected to keys, and there's also a 35-cent price variant when the prices went from 30 cents to 35 cents. That's the topic for another day. The 30-cent price variant has a census count of 432, which is about 1/25th of the regular 25-cent price book. So think of this as a 1 in 25 variant. The harder to find, in grade, obviously. But CGC does denote these as different books. They don't always do that with price differences, which we'll talk about in like 4 minutes, maybe less than that. Anyway, this has a census count of 432. Back to DC Comics. It's Batman Family #6. So this is the first appearance of Dula Dent, or Joker's daughter. This is a character. She first appeared as Joker's daughter, then in subsequent stories she was Catwoman's daughter and Scarecrow's daughter and Riddler's daughter, and then finally settled on being Two-Face's daughter, took on the mantle of Harlequin, joined the Teen Titans for a while, and then kind of faded into obscurity, reappeared as a much older character in Tales of the Teen Titans #50 at Donna Troy's wedding, and then Robin's like, wait, she's too old to be Two-Face's daughter, and then Crisis came and wiped everything out. And the character's been brought back a couple of times. One of the other interesting things about this particular book, it does have that bicentennial banner at the top with a number. All the DC books from July, or in this case July-August of 1976 have that. That's like a little collecting goal. I think I might be done with it. I actually have to really check. At any rate, this book has a census count of 400. Man-Bat #1 is next. Jerry Conway story. Steve Ditko and Al Milgrom did the interior art, and Jim Aparo did the cover. This lasted 2 issues. Did Man-Bat, character that premiered in Detective Comics 400. This has a census count of 394. The next book is another DC TV book, and this is Shazam #25. Just predates Isis #1 by a month or two. Denny O'Neil, E. Nelson Bridwell story, Dick Giordano art, and Kurt Scheffenberger did the cover. Origin and first appearance of Isis. She was already established for pretty much a year as having her own TV show, which was connected to Shazam. Here she is appearing in the Shazam book. Shazam at this time really leaned into the TV series. TV series is a little bit of a strange one, in which Billy Bat's a little bit older, and he's traveling the highways and byways of America in a Winnebago with a guy called Mentor, who wears like is it a safari jacket or a shooting jacket and a turtleneck. And then they solve pretty inconsequential crimes like, a bike is stolen or something like that. Or somebody needs a fishing permit. It's like really kind of silly. But what they did was to DC to kind of play on the Mentor character, Uncle Dudley. Uncle Marvel became Mentor and started dressing like him. Anyway, It's a whole thing. It was a DC TV comic. But Shazam 25 First Ice is 389 copies on the Census. Speaking of TV, let's go to our next book. This is from Charlton. This is The $6 Million Man, #1. Joe Giel did the story. Joe Staton did the art and the cover. First appearance of Steve Austin in comics based on the ABC TV series. Very popular series, especially with folks of my generation. I was, 10 years old, 10 years old at the time. The TV series ran from 1973 to 1978. It had been introduced by a couple of pilot movies, and then later on there were some reunion movies in the late 80s, early 90s. There were 3 of those. Charlton was doing a bit of TV adaptations. They also did Emergency in Space 1999 at this time in terms of live action. They had Scooby-Doo, Hong Kong Phooey, The Great Grape Ape, which is a giant green and a giant purple ape. The Great Gazoo, based on the character from Flintstones, Speed Buggy, and I think they also had, what was that crazy show? There was another crazy Saturday morning cartoon that they had at this time. They did get the Bionic Woman also, which was a spin-off of the $6 Million Man in TV. So anyway, $6 Million Man #1. This book ran for nine issues. Total number of Blue Label copies on the Census is 380. Next, from Christian Spire Comics, is Hansi, the Girl Who Loved the Swastika. She loved, past tense, the swastika. Al Hartley did the cover and art. This is a reprint of a book that came out a few years earlier. I think it was a 1974 book. I should check this, right? No, I think it was 73. And this is kind of a cover, a book that's sought after by collectors. Came out in 1973. Harder to find. This is a different price. It's another printing. There's both 39 and 49 cent prices that came out in 1976. 327 copies on the Census, which ties it with the next DC book on the list. This is the 8th DC book. This is Ragman #1. Robert Conagher did the story, and Joe Kuber did the art and the cover. Nestor Redondo did the interior art. Ragman was changed in the 90s to become he was retconned or reimagined as being Jewish, and kind of has this connection to Golem. But in the original incarnation, he was Rory Reagan, who was a Vietnam War veteran, and along with his father and some of his father's friends, they were all electrocuted, and he was the only one that survived, but he gained like the skills and abilities of everybody else, and they put all their clothes together or something into rags and became Ragman. Ran for 5 issues, not a lot of appearances until post-crisis. After that, there are a total number of 327 copies on the Census. 9th DC book on the list is Warlord #1. We talk about his first appearance in first issue special from the previous year. Mike Grell did everything on this and maintained the character for many years, including coming back for a reboot in like 2010-ish. It ran for 133 issues. And this particular book has a Census count of 314. Coming in at number 10 is another Action Comics reprint. This is one with a sleeping bag ad on the back. And the CGC just listed as a reprint. And there are, take a look at the back cover of the sleeping bag ad. There was another one later on with a peanut butter ad, I think. Again, newsprint cover. And a total of 307 copies on the Census. Let's talk about a couple of other DC keys. Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter #5 is the first appearance of Lady Shiva, who becomes involved with the Titans and stuff, and Batman. Denny O'Neil did the story. Rick Estrada and Wally Wood did the art, and Dick Giordano did the cover. 221 copies in the Census. Another DC TV book, a book that's based on a TV series. And this is Welcome Back, Kotter #1, based on the ABC sitcom that ran from 1975 to 1976, starring Gabe Kaplan as Mr. Kotter, the teacher of the Sweat Hogs. And the breakout star here was the guy you see there with the girl on his lap, and that was John Travolta, who played Vinnie Barbarino in the TV series. And the Welcome Back, Kotter series ran for 10 issues. Gabe Kaplan was a comedian, did some other TV work, not a whole lot. After this, he hosted a game show on ESPN at one time, and most famously, and if you are about my age, this is probably a formative television experience of your childhood, along with Fonzie jumping the garbage cans in front of Arnold's on the motorcycle. Battle of the Network Stars, the first ever Battle of the Network Stars, right? And if you're of a certain age, you probably don't know what Battle of the Network Stars is, but if you're, in your 50s or early 60s, you probably know very well what Battle of the Network Stars was. ABC, CBS, and NBC each brought teams together, and they did things like tug of war and, a dunk tank contest and swimming and kayak relays on the campus of Pepperdine University. And famously, Gabe Kaplan was the captain of ABC in the first one, and there was some controversy surrounding the running relay. And Robert Conrad, the NBC captain, was very upset about it. Great clip on YouTube. He's smoking his cigarette, and so he challenges Kaplan to a race. Conrad, tough guy, Wild Wild West, and he was in this show Baba Black Sheep about fighter pilots during World War II. And, this guy was like a kind of schlubby guy playing a high school teacher. But Gabe Kaplan was a runner in high school and smoked Robert Conrad. Actually, Robert Conrad probably smoked himself, because after about 60 meters, he probably got winded from all his cigarette smoking. One other comic book connection here. Mr. Woodman, the principal, on the right-hand side of the book, was played by John Sylvester White, who earlier in his life was married to Joan Alexander, the voice of Lois Lane on the radio serial in the 1940s, as well as the 1940s Filmation cartoons and the 1960s animated series. Anyway, Welcome Back, Kotter #1. I talk a lot about that show. 171 copies in the Census. We go to the next book on the list is Eternals #2, the 30-cent price variant. Talked about 30-cent price variants. Talked about Eternals #2, 168 copies in the Census. From Fitzgerald Periodicals is Fast Willie Jackson #1. Basically, Fast Willie Jackson is Archie with African Americans, right? It was written by Bertram Fitzgerald, and Gus Lemoyne did the cover and art. Book ran for 7 issues. And it didn't really, I guess, gain traction as an audience. And it was canceled. And Fitzgerald Periodicals had previously published comic books called Golden Legacy, which was about important African Americans and Africans in history. In the late 60s into the early 70s, this was after the Fast Willie Jackson was canceled, they no longer published any books. And the Fitzgerald is named after Bertram Fitzgerald, the creator of Fast Willie Jackson. There certainly are collectors that really seek out these books. Very difficult to get in high grade. And there are a total of 125 copies on the Census. One final DC book. I pointed out his retcon children. This is actually a double key. Favorite of mine. Detective Comics number 463. It's the first appearance of the Black Spider. It's also the first appearance of the Calculator. And being a math teacher, that's like a villain that I like. And I always grab this book when I see it. Just trying to find a really high grade copy that I can submit. 108 copies on the Census. Another independent book is next. American Splendor #1, self-published by Harvey Pekar. He had published 15 issues over like 15 years. This is an underground book, and it, Pekar had worked with R. Crumb, who also did work on this book, but basically, it's an autobiographical book. Pekar's struggles in life. It's very matter-of-fact, day-to-day, and Pekar was very anti-establishment. However, he did get some of his stories published by Vertigo, some by Dark Horse later on, and he did gain popularity. He was from Cleveland, and the stories were centered around Cleveland. He was I would say, semi-frequent guest on the Late Night with David Letterman, and they were great appearances because Picard was so anti-establishment, and he would attack Letterman for being a shill for GE, and Letterman was like, he later said, Letterman said he didn't really, I guess, have the experience at that point in time to know exactly how to handle Picard. And he said, I wish he had, like, just kind of given him more free reign, and would have, loved having him as a guest. His appearances were hilarious, but that helped promote him in the spotlight. And in 2003, American Splendor was a full-length theatrical release starring Paul Giamatti as Harvey Picard. But this is the first book, and it's an expensive book. If you can find a first print, total number of copies on the Census, just 93. And this is also, too, where we're kind of transitioning, I think, from the Haight-Ashbury, Peace, Love, and Drugs, underground comics with an X books of the late 60s, early 70s, kind of driven a lot by Crumb and others, which were, very adult-oriented. We do have, adult-oriented books later, but I think this is starting to see more of the outgrowth of the, I guess, the auteur as comic book artist, somebody that's putting their own vision. In this case, for Picard, it's autobiographical. For others, it would be different, and becoming more heading towards the independent comics that we would get later in the decade and into the 1980s. But let's go from Harvey Picard to Harvey. Top book on the Census for Harvey Comics is Richie Rich, Casper, and Wendy National League #1, celebrating the 100th anniversary of baseball's National League. There are actually 12 variants of this book. This particular one that I pulled up has the Houston Astros as the banner. There was one for each of the 12 National League teams at the time. And you can see all those logos on the side. 52 pages. Kind of a promotional book along with Major League Baseball. 74 copies on the Census. Top book from Gold Key is Star Trek number 37. This seems to be the most popular Gold Key book of the time. We have Dick Wood did the story, and George Wilson did the painted cover. 59 copies on the Census. From Warren, it's Eerie number 77. Richard Corbin did the cover. That is a prehistoric kind of fun cover. And this has an 8-page color insert with art by Jose Ortiz. This has a total number of copies on the Census of 44. Next book is we had this last year. This is Charlton Bullseye number 5 from CPL Gang Publications. It's a fanzine. You get a cover here by Alex Toth and Neil Adams. It's the last magazine issue of Charlton Bullseye. It wasn't published by Charlton Comics. They did publish their own Charlton Bullseye in the early 1980s. This is not it. John Byrne and Michael Uslan stories. Byrne and Alex Toth art. Got this great question cover. 32 copies on the Census. The next book is the top book from TSR Publications. This is Dragon number 1. TSR, Tactical Studios Rules, was the creator and publisher of Dungeons and Dragons beginning in 1973. Actually, they began publication in 73. Dungeons and Dragons came out in 1974. This magazine that came out in 1976 lasted for 206 print issues and went all the way to 413 issues with the digital when the TSR trademark got purchased by another company. They restarted this comic still as digital, or this magazine. This kind of promoted some ideas that were later included into the gaming of Dungeons and Dragons. I think this is more magazine than comic book, but still, it does have kind of a comic book-y connection. 32 copies on the Census. From Star Reach Publications, it is Quack number 1, with Duccaneer, who looks a little bit like another cartoon duck. Frank Brunner did the story cover and art. Howard Chaykin, Steve Leahola, Scott Shaw, and Dave Stevens contributed art to this book. This has a census count of 31. From O'Quinn Studios. Not a comic book, but something that I felt was worth noting. This is Starlog #1. This is a magazine devoted to fandom of science fiction, notably Star Trek, at least at this point in time, more than anything else, but Building the Bionic Woman, Space 1999, David Bowie's new sci-fi movie, Star Trek Complete Guide of all 79 episodes. Jack Thurston did the color cover, and this one is signed by William Shatner, this particular copy. At any rate, this, he signed it in black pen like below his face, and it blends in with the black of space. Not the best choice in pen color. 27 copies on the census. From Now and Then is Oktoberfest Comics #1. With Dave Sim's story and art. Talking about independent publishers, Sim would later go on to create and publish Cerebus, and then reveal himself as a controversial figure, I'll say. But this includes some early work by Dave Sim, and we have a census count here of 26. From Street Enterprises, Comic Reader #1. A Michael Tiefenbacher cover of Nova, again, a fanzine or an industry news publication, however you want to kind of frame it. This has a census count of 24. From Print Mint, it's Arcade, the Comics Review. R. Crumb did the story, cover, and art. Also includes art by Art Spiegelman, amongst others. This Bears, Martians, Toadettes, Malpractice, Sweet, Rowdy, Nudie. Census count here of 21. From Comely Comics is Captain Canuck #3. From Canada, talked about there would be a little bit of foreign comics, but that's about it. Captain Canuck #3 has 20 copies on the census. The next one is interesting. Godzilla vs. Megalon, no numbers. This is the top book from Cinema Shares. This was a 4-page promotional giveaway with the movie. But the movie came out in 1973. This is 76. They're believed that there is this 1973 version, but I don't think it's been able to be verified as any different than this one. Maybe the movie's re-released. Of course, Godzilla from Toho Studios. This is listed here as the first U.S. comic appearance of Godzilla. Well, not really. Godzilla appeared in the splash page of Life with Archie #41 as Archie, and I think, is he at the movies with Jughead? Or is it the whole gang, or is he on a date? I forget. Anyway, there's a Godzilla movie playing on the screen, so you see Godzilla on the screen. That's the entirety of the Godzilla appearance. This book, Godzilla collectors, covet it in any grade. Very, very expensive. I think this is probably even like a VG is like a $1,000 book. And we'll probably see more Godzilla in next week's episode. This has a total of 19 copies on the census, which ties it with the top book from Whitman, which is Star Trek #40. But, we already had Star Trek. This is true. But Gold Key, their books also got published with a Whitman imprint. Whitman kind of bundled comics together. They later worked with DC and Marvel into multi-packs that were sold at like department stores and stuff. So the same book, same price. The only thing is the corner box is a Whitman corner box instead of a Gold Key corner box. And it has 19 copies on the census. Top book from EC is Mad #184. I honestly don't know why this particular issue pops, but it does. 15 copies on the census. The next book is not a comic book. It's a top book from Billboard magazines. And it's American Artist #406. It's an illustration issue with a cover by Frank Frazetta. And I thought that connection to comic books was important to include it on the list. They have a whole article, I believe, on Frazetta inside. This had 12 copies on the census, which ties it with the top book from Kitchen Sink Press, which is Kurtzman Comics, with a K and an X for comics. Harvey Kurtzman cover and art. Kurtzman had worked on EC, also worked on Playboy, which may be a little bit of an influence in the cover here. This, again, is adults only, which is a lot of what Kitchen Sinks was publishing at the time and into the 1980s as well. 12 copies on the Census. From Byler Press, their top book is R. Crumb's Carload of Comics. And this is the first time that some of these stories, the Crumb stories as a whole, were printed in color. And it was manufactured bound to Cherry Magazine, Volume 1, Number 5. Smaller than a comic book. It's R. Crumb. 11 copies on the Census. From Prairie Tales is Authentic Visionary Comics number 1. I'm not sure what else to say about it. I actually have a copy right over there of this book that I just recently pulled out of a pile of stuff that I have. Anyway, this has 10 copies on the Census. The next book on the list is Middle Class Fantasies number 2 from Keith Green. This is a little bit tamer, I believe, than the cover of Middle Class Fantasies number 1. Kind of looks like that's Jane Russell. Although a lot of times I think it's Jane Russell on the cover of a comic book. 7 copies on the Census. The top book from Western Publishing is Kite Fun Book. No number. There are a lot of Kite Fun books. But this is the Brady Bunch one. So you got the whole Brady gang out here 2 years after the show was canceled. This is the Southern California Edison promotional edition. There's also the Pacific Gas and Electric one. Kite Fun Book. 6 copies on the Census, which ties it with the top book from Last Gasp, which is Slow Death number 7, which has a William Stout cover. Again, that one's 6 copies on the Census. The top book from Alan Light is Flashback number checks notes number 37, which is a reprinting of Captain Midnight number 1 from Fawcett Publications. 5 copies on the Census, which ties it with this really strange book, The Life and Loves of Cleopatra, from Apex Novelties. For adults only. 5 copies on the Census. And we have also Mother Oates Comics, the top book from Ripoff Press. Gilbert Shelton did the art. Dave Sheridan and Frank Shire did the cover. 3 copies on the Census. And that ties it way down on the list. Way, way, way down on the list is the top book from Archie. And this is Josie and the Pussycats number 91, which kind of has a little bit of an innuendo cover. There, the Josie and the gang are around the pool. And is that Melody? Alex, which of us girls gets the best parts? The girls with the best parts. I actually had a copy of this that I put up at an auction on Whatnot. It went for like $57. Yeah, but only 3 copies on the Census. So that's going to do it for 1976. I'd like to thank you for stopping by and spending some time with me going through this little slice of comic book history. We'll be back again next week with 1977. And in the meantime, you can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.